Hello, I'm Dusty Hunt, and this is Jack London's To Build a Fire. Jack London was a 19th century author and journalist, best known for his adventure novels White Fang and Call of the Wild. Alfred Kazan said it best when he said, "The greatest story Jack London ever wrote was the story he lived." Jack London was born John Griffith Cheney to William Cheney, an astrologer, and Flora Wellman, a spiritualist and teacher, on January 12, 1886. Jack London took his stepfather's last name and was forced to grow up fast due to family finances. At 15, he was already living an adventurous life, illegally fishing. At 17, he became a seaman on a Japanese sealing schooner. After he returned home, he joined Coxley's Army, a protest group marching on D.C. Afterwards, he spent time as a tramp or a hobo. He returned home to go to Berkeley, which he left early to travel to the Yukon. Becoming ill, he was forced to return home, where he got married and started writing to provide for his many different family members. Jack London will forever be immortalized in the silver screen through such movies as The Iron Heel, Call of the Wild, and North to the Klondike. But there are plenty others to go along with these three. Bruce Watson, a journalist for the Smithsonian Magazine, says, "To Build a Fire is a masterful tale of frozen death and has become an American icon in short stories, which has been translated into over 100 different languages." I chose this short story mainly because of the author. The first chapter book I can remember growing up as a child was The Call of the Wild. Jack London has a way with his style of writing that transports you into his stories, almost to the point you could see yourself being the main character. His use of naturalism and realism allows his settings to pull up out of the page and throw itself around you to experience firsthand. To Build a Fire is no exception. It is a short story about a man hiking a back trail in the Yukon with a dog in 70 below zero weather. Throughout the story, London artistically describes exactly all that would entail with such a dangerous expedition. At times you pity the man, and at other times you despise the man. In the end, it is a story about the battle between man and nature, and makes one wonder what would happen for men to beat nature. Day had broken, cold and gray, exceedingly cold and gray, when the man turned aside from the main Yukon Trail and climbed the high earth bank, where a dim and little-traveled trail led eastward through the fat spruce timberland. That's the opening statement of To Build a Fire. I believe it sets a perfect scene to this story, and that's just a small example of Jack London's description. He was a newcomer in the land, a Chechakwa, and this was his first winter. The trouble with him was that he was without imagination. He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things, and not in the significances. 50 degrees below zero meant 80-odd degrees of frost. 50 degrees below zero was to him just precisely 50 degrees below zero. That there should be anything more to it than that was a thought that never entered his head. This is just the introduction to the man walking through the woods, basically saying that he was smart but didn't have much common sense, and I think that foreshadows everything that's going to happen later on. At the man's heels trotted a dog, a big native husky, the proper wolf dog, gray-coated and without any visible or temperamental difference from its brother, the wild wolf. The animal was depressed by the tremendous cold. It knew that it was no time for traveling. Its instinct told it a truer tale than was told to the man by the man's judgment. Here's the introduction to the dog, which is Jack London's animal that he usually uses to show nature's response to situations caused by men. At lunch, he tried to take a mouthful, but the ice muzzle prevented him. He had forgotten to build a fire and thaw out. He chuckled at his foolishness. Working carefully from a small beginning, he soon had a roaring fire. This shows the carelessness of the man, and the man believing he was going to make it since he was able to make this first fire. At a place where there were no signs, where the soft, unbroken snow seemed to advertise solidity beneath, the man broke through. It was not deep. He wedged himself halfway to the knees before he floundered out to the firm crust. This is the domino that starts the ending, and again it shows the man just being smart but no common sense. The fire was a success. He was safe. He remembered the advice of the old-timer on Sulphur Creek and smiled. The old-timer had been very serious in laying down the law that no man must travel alone in the Klondike. Well, here he was. He had had the accident, he was alone, and he had saved himself. Again, this shows the pride of the man, thinking he was better than the old-timer after he was able to start a fire to dry himself out. It was his own fault, or rather his mistake. He should not have built the fire under the spruce tree. He should have built it in the open, but it had been easier. Now the tree under which he had done this carried away the snow on its boughs. It grew like an avalanche and descended without warning. Where it had burned was a mantle of fresh and disordered snow. It was as though the man had just heard his own death sentence. Here he is trying to dry himself off after the accident. This is where common sense or a partner could have came in handy to save his life. Says the old timer on Sulphur Creek was right, he thought in the moment of controlled despair that ensued. After 50 below, a man should travel with a partner. Here he starts realizing his error, but he still doesn't want to accept it, and he continues fighting. A certain fear of death, dull and oppressive, came to him. This fear quickly became poignant as he realized it was no longer a mere matter of freezing fingers and toes, but a matter of life and death. This threw him into a panic, and he turned and ran up the creek bed along the old dim trail. This, I believe, is showing the first 3 stages of death. Denial, him thinking he can continue on. Anger, mad at himself for the situation and not being able to continue on. Bargaining by begging to be able to continue on farther, run faster. He was losing in his battle with the frost. You were right, old hoss, you were right, the man mumbled to the old-timer of Sulphur Creek. I believe this was kind of like a depression stage where he was realizing that he should have just listened to the old man instead of thinking himself better. Thus the man drowsed off into what seemed to him the most comfortable sleep he had ever known. Then the dog delayed a little longer. It turned and trotted up the trail in the direction of the camp it knew, where the other food providers and fire providers were. This is the last stage acceptance. He had laid down and decided to just go to sleep because he knew he couldn't go no farther. But the dog turning away and walking is the key part to Jack London's story, where it shows the indifference of nature to situations and a triumph of instinct, the dog's instinct, over the rationality of the man. This was To Build a Fire by Jack London. Follows is a quote that describes his life entirely. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy, permanent planet. The proper function of man is to live, not exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. Thank you.
Created using Powtoon.